jazz and the orchestra. I think schools with great funding, have a lot of money, a lot of resources, tend to have a lot of white people. That's the orchestra. They're learning how to be classically trained on the clarinet and on the flute and all these things. A lot of times we get things is much more in a jazz bluesy way, right? It's like we seeing somebody use it, they get us the instrument in our hands, and then we make magic with it. I think that's what's going to happen with AI. There are going to be people that's going to be trained on how to use it. It's learning every day. It's changing every day. I think you're going to get that in the hands of some very artistic young people, some very smart young people, and you're going to teach them the basics, but they're going to put their soul into it. They're going to put their hip hop into it. They're going to put the things that they love into it. And I think something beautiful can come out of it. You got to let young people play around with it. I think that you have to introduce these concepts, but I do think education will look significantly different with the advent of AI.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Charles Cole III. It's Freedom Friday, and you're still not free, but hopefully in about an hour with us, you'll be a little freer. I clearly am not my brother and friend, Chris Stewart. I am the substitute host today. He is out doing great and amazing things in the world, but I get to be joined by two people that I have deep affection for and care for and kind of look up to, but don't tell Sharif because his head is already big. I am joined by the one and only Mr. Ismael and Sharif El Mekki. How you fellas doing, man?
Good, man. Good. My head is not, it's big, but not in that sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's all love, bro. I love you back.
Man,
it's always good to be here. You know
it's good to be in space with y'all, man. It's weird and awkward that I'm co-hosting on y'all's show, but I like it, man. I see them do it on ESPN, so I see big things happening in the EdPost space. Just for my own edification, can I just check in with you brothers real quick, just briefly? I just want to know how you doing, man. Ish, what's new with you? How you been?
Man, I'm doing well, surviving the times. You know what I mean? Like trying to do some real work and a lot of fakeness, but work is getting done.
That's what's up, man. Mr. Sharif, how you doing?
Fake. Yeah, doing well, man. Listen, got a daughter that is a freshman in college, you know what I mean? And then third and fifth graders. So it's moving, man. It's moving. But we ended Freedom School Literacy Academy. We're launching Teacher Academy and getting ready for BMEC in 80 days, 90 days, something. So
congratulations,
busy,
brother.
Busy.
Man, so I'm just blessed and happy to be here, man. And it's good to see y'all. Y'all both look great. I'm really excited about this conversation because there's a lot of things happening in the AI space and it's in the zeitgeist now. And our friend and brother, Chris Stewart, had a nice interview on one of their new shows, Vector, on EdPost. And why don't we take a look at this clip and then we can come back and talk about AI and the future of it with students.
A lot of this conversation we're having right now is only so that we clear-cut pathways for young people right now to get to places that they're not getting already, like get to jobs they're not having, and to stop having this conversation around why can't we find any diversity in such and such a pipeline? That feels like the silliest question to be asking for 50 years. Figure it out. It isn't exactly rocket science. Pay me some money. I'll go find people for you.
I'll give you one of my hot takes because it actually came to exist because of the AI talent conversation. Everyone is talking about how do we find the machine learning engineers of today? How do we find those who can write the data sets such that they are inclusive and equitable? And to answer a talent problem of today, you would have had to design the solution 20 years ago when they were in elementary school, because there are certain choices that have to happen in elementary school to make them eligible for certain middle schools. You have to make certain choices in middle school to have access to certain high schools and certain experiences in high school. So there's this kind of retrospective. Any talent problem is an education problem of yesterday.
Wow. That's not just a hot take. That's also depressing a little bit.
But it's not depressing if we're having conversations about what skills do we support and emphasize today? How do we create access today in young people?
All right. So we just heard that great take. And for everybody watching, go check out Vector on EdPost. But let's start here. Ish, let's go with you first. What's your reaction to the clip and what was said? What stood out for you?
I think what stood out is the fact that we need to be thinking forward 20 years in the future, not being like we're preparing our students for the 21st century skills for the global economy today, when we didn't think about that 30 years ago, right? And I think that this shows that folks are behind the curve when we're thinking about how do we prepare our children for the future? What jobs would be available in 20 years? And what are we putting in place right now for our students to have access to and to even imagine and think about what that would look like, instead of kind of relying on the same old type of status quo educational models in which currently exist and in front of most of our students today.
I got you, Sharif. What about you? Like, what, like around maybe it's too late, or we started too late, or whatnot. Like, what's your general reaction to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with Aaron. First of all, let me just shout out Sister Aaron. You know, like she's a dope sister. My brother was actually her chess coach, and when she was in elementary school. So just you know, when I met her, and she's in philanthropy and tech philanthropy and things like that. So, and a leader here in Philly, in several different circles. But I agree with her wholeheartedly. There's a old adage, something to the effect of best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the next best time is today. Right? So it's like we have to do longer. Just have a longer view, I was just talking about this yesterday. We had a group of us at University of Pennsylvania with, some national scholars and stuff, and really talking about like even just this idea of a Black teacher pipeline. Most districts in this country are thinking about September's vacancies. And that's what all the engine, all the thought processes, all of the resources is just thinking about September, and then maybe after every break. Like, oh, after Thanksgiving, somebody might not return. After Christmas break, somebody might not return. After spring break. Like, it is that. The long view of, okay, we have to hire 800 teachers. Last 15 years, every year we had to hire between 800 and 1,000 teachers. Okay, let's think long term. How do we invest early on so that when we get to that point, we have a wider pool? So I think it's the same thing, for the tech space. Like, how do you invest early? Not just, oh, I don't see anybody. Like, no, what did you do to invest so that you can see somebody and that somebody sees you? Somebody sees your place as a place for them. You got to have a longer viewpoint, just like city planning, right? I think we talked about this a while back, Cole on 8 Black Hands. Like, city planners are thinking 50 years down the road.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that in other spaces?
I mean, yeah, man. And actually, if you read The Education of Blacks in the South, those people that were trying to take education away from those Black people, they said we can't give them just free education because that's going to be our cheap labor. And if we do, we're going to have to go overseas and do globalization. Like, they talked about that even before globalization was a thing. I really like the clip, man. I think, and that show looks incredible. I'm going to check out Vector on the EdPost. I took the clip in two ways and two different topics. The topic of preparing students for the future and the industries that's coming, and then this impending conversation around AI. So before I transfer us into that AI conversation, I want to respond to just emerging industries and what the sister said. I actually agree with her in a lot of different ways, and also looking at the context of who she is and the work she does. She's in philanthropy. Her job is to support and like build out what the future, like where are we making these bets and these investments? And, it's putting a fire into people saying, hey, we're behind on this. How do we catch up and how do we do it? And, I always think about that quote, Sharif will fix it and Ismael will fix it for me, but just about broken men, right? It's easier to raise up, good boys than it is to, repair broken men. But I think about that though, but yet and still broken men still need to be repaired. So when I'm thinking about that, I don't want people to take her clip and not do the work with the young people that's there now in fear of, well, we missed that boat already, right? We can't make these investments. These kids are too far gone. we work in Black education where when you get to high school and you got people's reading scores 3, 4, 5, grade levels behind. A lot of institutions take that thought process and they apply it to those kids, but they're not philanthropists like she is. Like, it's a different role and perspective. So that's what I was hearing. I didn't want people to misuse her words to not do the business of the people that are there now. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think I would even just add, not just industry, because even as a teacher and a principal, I was always just like super sensitive about, when industry is just like, we need workers. Like I'm always like, it always like just does something to me internally a little bit, because I want our folks to be able to navigate and also be entrepreneurs and own their masters, to quote Prince. Shout out to the biggest Prince fan, who's not here today, and Stewart. But right, like so it's like, it's not just, we're not educating so that people can fill your slots in your industry, but we do want our students to be able to say, like, what's needed in the world, right? And so it may end up like, I'm going in this industry because this is a problem that I want to solve, and they have the infrastructure for me to jump in, or I'm learning this tech, AI, savviness and being able to navigate because of what I want to do, as a independent, as a entrepreneur, just as a citizen, all those kind of things as well. So, and then just to shout out, our guy Confucius, he was like, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. Back to my tree analogy. If your plan is for 100 years, educate children. So it all comes back to, like she said, a education issue. Most problems in the world are tied to ignorance or education. I would say all, but just top of my head, let's just say most.
Well, I love that, man, and just I think you did a good transition for us. And shout out to Confucius. He was he was in Memphis with us. I think the homie
no
Confucius.
No doubt. Frederick Douglass was too. You know what I'm saying?
chilling, man, chilling. We we had a good conversation. But Ish, I'm coming to you, and then back clean up on this, Sharif. We talk about equity a lot in education spaces, but what does that conversation look like when we start talking about emerging technologies like AI and how it should be used in schools?
Well, one thing that I found real fascinating as a teacher in the classroom was the move towards a one-to-one model, right? And the one-to-one model was really put out in many other schools, like, I don't want to name the schools specifically, but schools that were trying to be innovative, right? But then when it came to neighborhood schools which are not special admit for students, it turned into students consuming products rather than making material. And so that was the difference that I saw right away, that a lot of our children are being put in front of this innovative technology, but they're put in front of it in a way to consume it rather than use it in order to produce. And I think that's the shift of frame of reference that we need to emphasize in education, that we need to move away from this just consuming this material and then encouraging our students to know how to use the tools necessary to produce something different. And I think there's too much of an emphasis on that kind of box checking where too many schools where our children are founded, where it's easier to deal with that than actually go out of our way through the grueling and long process of actually emphasizing reading and writing every day, right? Emphasizing the ability to produce. Because I could tell you the generation below us, man, they are all have like entrepreneurial mind states, but then the tools necessary to produce those things are usually pigeonholed into like the same kind of fashion of just either going into certain industries, or is it to, make t-shirts? Not to throw shade at anybody that does that, because that's just the beginning. But if we give those tools necessary to produce at a young age and they're building off of that over time, then they're nation building at that point, like Sharif was just referring to, and thinking long term about how can I change the circumstances with the reality I exist in, with the tools that I understand and use, and then what tools can be produced from that aren't around right now to allow me to get to that destination. And I think that type of thinking needs to be emphasized more, especially in the schools and educational situations that a lot of our children find themselves in. And we need to step away from this, like, here, log into this computer program and then do these like mathematical equations through Khan Academy or something like that. without understanding, hey, you can produce something like that yourself. And here are the tools that they use to produce what you're using right now or what other people are using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sharif, I wanted you to chime in on that, man. Like, Ish made some really good points. When we start talking about this emergent technology and AI is the emergent joint, as you would say affectionately, John, like, how
No
should
doubt,
it
no
be
doubt.
used in schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, we gotta, again, it seems like we're always behind. We're always behind. Like just you think about in order for students to have anything, that means there needs to be a level of expertise with the adults as well. But this also can be an opportunity where students, if they are ahead, that they can it can be kind of joint learning space. But one, the teachers, the educators have to be at least comfortable and have a level of understanding. And I look at it from two ways, the entrepreneurship and not just the consumer aspect of it. Just like what the world might look like 20, 30 years from now and what is AI. But then also I think is really important. Part of education is be able to protect yourself and your family and your community. And with AI, just when I see that they can have your voice and use AI to say anything, I think being able to discern from falsehood from truth becomes even more. It was already hard just with rumors, right? Like, just with things in the media where Malcolm would say, like, yo, be careful with what you consume in the media because they'll have you thinking the oppressed is the oppressor and the oppressor is the victim, right? And we saw that just with print media, let alone now where if you're trying to discern truth and identify propaganda and all these things with AI, it becomes just that much more complicated, right? Because right now it's like, it's kind of comical, but imagine this with COINTELPRO mindset, with the funding of COINTELPRO. And when they talk about like,
Can you imagine if Hoover had AI, like just
bruh,
AI? Oh, woo.
man, you know what I mean? So, but we have a Hoover today. And so Hoover does have
Right,
AI, right?
right.
Hoover just changed his name. His mindset is the same, right? And so we got to just figure out, like, to me, that's a big part of education. Our homie Dr. Robert Simmons, introduced me to Dr.
What's up,
Joy.
Rob?
I think her name is Bulamwini. And I'm probably butchering her name, and my apologies, Dr. Joy. But she wrote this book, AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in the World of Machines, unmasking.ai. So people should check out unmasking.ai. The Algorithmic Justice League is what she founded, the Algorithmic Justice League. So again, justice, how is justice tied into this, right? And we saw this already, right? Like, as far as AI and engineers who were even like, a small example, cars, self-driving cars couldn't identify people with melanin and looked at them as inanimate objects, a tree, a rock, or whatever, which means, it could hit you and not think anything else about, right? Like it didn't, the way it's engineered, the way that it saw, people on this kind of gradient of, however these machines and AI work, you were inanimate, and so what does that mean if it's a car, you know, however many pounds that is, driving and black kid crossing the street isn't identified as a human being, whatever that means. What is the impact and who designed it? Who's that? All of these things to me is a part of education and being able to protect ourselves and like, recognizing like, yo, and then, but it goes back to history too. Like, hey, COINTELPRO now on steroids. What does that mean? How do we protect ourselves? You got to know something about it in order to protect yourself. So all these things I think of, for me, is a part of like how education should be thinking about it. And it's complex. It's complicated. Like, all I have right now are questions and getting people, if I had students, it would just be like, let's think and let's talk. Cause I wouldn't be the sage on the stage with any answers. Cause I'm like, I don't know. So we're all learning together, but that can push us to even think about what our classrooms look like differently.
Well, one, I just think those are both very just thoughtful answers. Like y'all are just thoughtful educators. So kudos to that. I think two, we're looking at this question in interesting ways, right? It's like there's the AI of it, and then there's the emergent technologies or new skill sets that are coming along, and the distribution of education for those Black, brown, poor kids in under-resourced schools. Like if that's something that we're worried about. And when I look at this, right, from an industry standpoint, I'll respond like this, right? I look at it as, jazz and the orchestra. Like I think schools with great funding, that have a lot of money, a lot of resources, tend to have a lot of white people. I think that's the orchestra. They're learning how to be classically trained on the clarinet and on the flute and all these things. And I think that a lot of times we get things is much more in a jazz type of bluesy way, right? It's like we seeing somebody use it, they get us the instrument in our hands, and then we make magic with it. I can't say improvising for whatever reason, but there's a lot of that's happening. I think that's what's going to happen with AI. I think that there are going to be people that's going to be trained on how to use it. It's learning every day. It's changing every day. I think you're going to get that in the hands of some very artistic young people, some very smart young people, and you're going to teach them the basics, but they're going to put their soul into it. They're going to put their hip hop into it. They're going to put the things that they love into it. And I think something beautiful can come out of it. AI in and of itself can be a very scary thing, but it's here. It's that toothpaste is out the tube. You can't put that back in. So how are we making sure that, like you said, that our young people are not being taken advantage of it by it, but are you be able to use it? And I tend to look at AI as like a language calculator. That's what it does. It takes large language models and it's spitting out things based off of language models that it finds on the internet and in books. I'm looking at, for us, it's like, if we don't start talking about this stuff and embracing it and embracing our fear, run towards the fear, we would probably end up doing our young people more of a disservice. So, I think you got to let young people play around with it. I think that you have to introduce these concepts. But I do think education will look significantly different with the advent of AI. It's reading whole books and summarizing it in 25 seconds, man. Like it's crazy. Like it's crazy.
No, I'm absolutely, and I think one of the biggest challenges is if if the adults are so fearful. I remember when there were conversations about like, should calculators be in class or in schools, period, and should computers be in schools? I think each of those it's a misstep and it's short-sightedness. But fear comes from ignorance, and ignorance comes from not knowing, not understanding, not those kind of things. So I think we have to figure out how to accelerate and shorten the learning curve as much as possible. Like as you said, not only is it here, AI has been being used for a long time. Like it's just like for a really long time. And as you said, like people who are getting the in-depth knowledge and understanding and being able to manipulate and use it. I look at AI as a tool. And any tool can be used for good or for evil, and there's a little neutrality and gray space in there as well. So I'm like, if we look at it as a tool and think like, okay, how can we use this effectively to improve the conditions of, and the plight of mankind, then we should be doing that, and we should be thinking deeply and creatively as well as ethically about it. But in order to think about something ethically, you need to know it and understand it in depth, right? And so, like, I think I hear some people talking about morality and ethics, and they don't even know what it is, right? And so that's when you start describing in broad brushes, like, oh, it's all, everything about it is bad. I'm like, nah, that's actually untrue, right? Like, so there are a lot of things and ways that I think everything starts with mindset, skill, and will. I think most things. I'm trying to not use absolutes. I'm working on that. Not everything.
Well, I want to stay with you.
A lot of things.
I want to stay with you, Sharif. I've been starting with you a lot, Ish. So I'm gonna give you a break and come to you on clean up. But but I think that you said something powerful there. And instead of focusing on our deficits, Sharif, are there areas like that our kids are just actually ahead on and could just naturally shine in AI and technology and these other unforeseen things coming down the pipe?
Well, I don't know all, because I don't know it enough to say like, oh, this discrete skill ties to this. But what I would say is, overall, our youth, their thumbs are a lot stronger. They've been, doing stuff with AI, with the dexterity of their fingers, but also the dexterity of their mind. Just broadly, the dexterity, nimbleness, creativity, less fear, uninhibited, kind of vision, all of those bode well for anyone trying to learn anything. And especially something like this that they view as exciting and not intimidating, right? I think the older we get, the more it's easier to rattle us. With them, they're like looking at it like, oh, okay. And I think what we need is as Amir Suleiman says, zeal of the young and the patience of the old, the wisdom of the old, right? And so like if we can merge like, hey, here's a tool, here are just cautionary rules, just like protecting your children online. Like, is it like never get online, never do it, no banking, no this, no that, no, and don't read, no, don't access, online books, none of that. Or, hey, here's how you protect yourself online. Right. And, back to what we used to talk about, like, what problems do they think they could solve with AI? What questions do they want to have answered through AI? So I think, just them being able to be nimble is is a plus, and that same zeal can get you in trouble and lead you into roads that are unprotected. So we just got to make sure that we are supporting them in that way. But I think, listen, it's a tool, and we would be it would be ignorant for us to allow our communities and youth to fall even further back. Because if we thought we were behind with the digital divide, not having access online, not having, part of oppression is lack of information. And if we know so much of this is going to be through AI, so will misinformation or disinformation, right? So again, this is here, and we can put our play ostrich and put our head in the sand if we want, but we will eventually come out of it and be light years behind, and being taken advantage of in whole new ways that we hadn't even thought of. And don't want to do it from the negative. I really want to think about it like not only from there. I do think we have to protect ourselves, but also just really think, okay, how could this help and support our communities, and the children have to be a part of leading that way.
Ish, like, what areas do you see our kids that were there just actually already ahead and could naturally shine with this tech?
Well, I think number one, there's one of the greatest strengths right now is a healthy skepticism. Not believing everything that you told. Like this, they know all this stuff. Like social media, you're talking about a whole generation brought up in that. They know that half of it is just image and fakeness, right? And so, like, they are not quick to co-sign. They also know that what has produced right now hasn't necessarily been good. And so I think knowing that and then having that consciously at the top of your mind when you're approaching this situation has already given our children a step up in the game, because they're like, oh, I don't believe that person said that, even though that's a deep fake. You know what I mean? And so like having that, sniffing that out will be a skill that will be in need as we go on this new path. You know what I mean? As we go down this road of AI becoming much more integrated within our lives. Along with that, I would also say that AI also produces that opportunity to make the world smaller. When I was in South Africa, there was a lot of talk across the continent of Africa about how most of the folks coming up are younger generation, college educated, no jobs, but then still like the thinking is, how do we actually produce a society where folks can eat and throw off these shackles of coloniality, right? And I think that children in the States, children across the world can connect around those ideas and share those ideas in ways that never were possible before. And that will produce an opportunity, especially if it's rooted in Pan-African thought, especially if it's rooted in a sense that, don't trust them folks telling you what it is. I think that you would produce something that the world has never seen before. And that strength we need to lean into. When I was last time in the classroom and I was talking to my students, all the events that were happening at the world all the time, they would always be like, how do you know that's true, Jimenez? How do you know that's actually going down? How do you know they're not lying to us? And that, just by default, is going to go a long way as we're going down this road.
Man, I think that's dope, man. I think, as I think about this question around what are we already doing well, and shout out to Chris, because Chris, even in our new Niagara tour that we're on right now, you'll hear more details about that later. Chris was emphasizing, how do we focus on what we're our successes? How do we sit in that we just not used to doing it. We so used to having to talk about the deficit. So, I will take a little bit of a liberty to just talk about some of those successes that I think our kids will be really good at, and just my own experience with the technology. I think young people in general, regardless of race, class, whatever, like there's a creativity, there's an innocence in which they see the world and interact with things. And I think that it can be heightened by this, right? Like think about what we're doing right now. 20 years ago, we would have needed to have be tied to a major network, and it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in staff. It's four of us. It's us three and somebody behind the scenes, like doing this on a computer. And just think about where this is going to be in 20 years with young people that are trying to get their voices out, or trying to learn or embrace this world. So I think that's going to be dope. Like if you think of this like a super calculator of what calculations did for numbers, like we're a long way from the abacus to the type of problems we can solve now because of where technology is. Like, what if we were able to take everything Sharif El-Mekki has written his entire life from kindergarten to now, throw that in AI, and they'll be able to track his learning and his maturation process. What does that do to the teaching profession? Or what does that do to our understanding of how the human brain works and learns? Like the possibilities of this are so wide open. Like it's very scary. And there's
I don't want anybody tracking that.
I'm not saying to track it. I'm talking about what if
no,
you
I'm
were
saying
able to do it.
my writing. I'm saying don't look at that.
But that's the point, though. That's the point, right? So one of my homies here's how I'm thinking about technology. One of my homies played in the NBA for a long time. He was a center in the Warriors. And 1 year, it went from 1 year of like regular training to the next year. They had all these analytics. Hey, man, you go left 47% of the time, you go right 53% of the time. You shoot from here X amount of time. Like, and it just opened up like how he had to look at the game. You now have to look at the game different because there are new tools there. And I think our young people, what they do better than anybody is that they're able to adapt so much better than we are. I think some of us are going to be dinosaurs in this piece. And what I would just say, my AI for me has been a godsend because I run a nonprofit company and I run my own little consultancy. But the amount of people that I would need to do my consultancy well, AI has liberated me on some level to be able to do some of that stuff on my own, right? Like whether it's just simple tasks of emails or crunching data or getting all, bodies of information out there. I just think you're going to see music change. I think we're already seeing it. They're already taking AI voices of Michael Jackson and putting them on this new song.
That's what we're going to have.
I mean, I think it's scary, man. I think there needs to be, that's why you have to embrace it so you can fix it on the front end or so you can prepare people. Like I'm one of those young people that because of how I grew up poor, I grew up with a different mindset, right? Like I have a very high scarcity mindset. I can name that and naming it is part of the problem, but it doesn't just change overnight because I'm 41. I've been steeped in it since I didn't have home security. Like I'm secure in where I live until I was like 15 years old. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm not having to up and move. So how you steep kids early on will shape how they see a lot of things for a long time. And I just think that, I think a lot of people are trying to deny AI, deny this new technology, not embrace it. And I think that will hurt our community more than like being weary of it, like you said, Ish. You know what I mean? But being able to raise young people with a strong enough foundation. My foundation was not strong. I did not have a strong foundation, and I'm building that up even now as an adult. And I think that we can help young people not have to go through that. That's my thing. I know that was really long-winded, man, but that I just want to make sure we've missed the boat on a lot of stuff. I lived in the Bay. They had the green tech revolution that Van Jones was trying to do when he was under Obama before he got fired. And then you had Silicon
Obama
Valley.
Fired Van Jones?
Yeah, he got fired. No, he got fired. He was very publicly fired. He definitely had to fall on that sword for the Obamas. I mean, for the administration.
Never heard of that.
But we also had
CNN.
You said what?
I only knew him from CNN. I had no idea he was
started
in the
with Obama
administration.
He got fired. He went to a very, very deep depression. Prince helped pull him out of it. But yeah, I was in Oakland, man. Like he was in Oakland during that time. But even in Oakland, we also had Silicon Valley in our back door, and so many of these black kids were pushed out of that. There were so many international people that we were bringing in and doing those things instead of making sure our young people were able to embrace it. But here's the thing. Even without the resources, even without the best schools, even without the best structures, we always find it and we always hip-hopify, jazzify that thing up. We always remix it. We always put our own soul and our own spin on it. I think the kids are going to be all right. I'm more worried about us a little bit because I think that they just have pure hearts and are looking at the world in a very open way.
Yeah, and I just hope that we can, also, because I think that also, I agree with you. And, it goes back to like the resiliency piece. Like, I really want to I don't want our kids to always have to be Fat Albert in a gang. You know what I mean? Like turning, the junk into something like that's the creativity. And absolutely, like, yes, we want to keep that. And how do you like you said, equity, level the playing field, give them, just a basic, solid foundation and allow them to thrive, but not, because sometimes you can lose the creativity and things like that as well. Right. So how do we make sure that they have both? I think for me is, just a really important piece. And, just one other quick piece, like, for the teachers who've been nervous about AI or trying to avoid it, like, there are folks who've been using AI software forever, and maybe even some of them, like if you have like platforms where kids are practicing their writing and it's giving them feedback, or it's like, all right, as they answer questions, with a higher degree of correctness, and it's giving them harder problems, or if they're struggling, it brings the level down. Like all of that, that's all AI. You know what I mean? It's not having a teacher do it every single time. So that's also just like, okay, how can this help, be effective, but also not lose the human element, not make people more isolated, less connected, right? Like, what's that thing? The more connected we are, the more disconnected we are, So all of those things are what we need teachers to also be thinking about, and helping students like, hey, this has a negative impact on your mental health. Let's just name it. Like this, technology, it has an impact on your connectivity to people, nature, but it doesn't have to be, right? Like there could also be ways to make sure we're deepening connections, but you still got to have the human to human relationship. So all of these things are complex, complicated, and worthy of us thinking about, but thinking about it with our youth. So, listen, invite them to the table to solve problems that they had no hand in creating.
Ish, you were itching to jump in. Go ahead and jump in, brother.
Yeah, I just want to veggie back off of the idea of dehumanizing.
Veggie back is just
veggie back. Listen, I don't eat pork.
It throws me off
Cole
every
haven't
time.
heard that in a while.
Yeah, I don't eat pork, man. No, but what's that called? It's just,
they can't exist, brother. They can't exist in the world, brother. Like
keep it. Not only keep the pork off my fork, keep it out my language. Like I don't even want to hear it.
Keep it off the earth.
Listen,
sorry.
I don't speak evil on that.
Sorry, Wilmer. Wilbur. That was his name, and yeah. Charlotte's Web.
No, but when we think of education, it should be humanizing. And that's one thing that we need to make sure is not lost. And Sharif, I really appreciate you emphasizing that, because we need to make sure that those human connections are still being authentically created. We also need to make sure that we're investing. So like when you're talking about like Silicon Valley and all the Green Revolution, all those pieces, like there was investment into that decades beforehand, right? Let's circle back to the first video. And that a lot of those folks came out of those spaces. A lot of that funding came out of like not only governmental grants, but purposefully sought out by folks saying that we have these ideas and we're going to put this in motion. So how are we investing within our youth now? Which then ties back to what Sharif was saying about Confucius. Are we more concerned about next year? Are we more concerned about 10 years? Or are we thinking 100 years? And what do we need to invest in at this point, for what and where, in order to actually create a future that we want to see and make it the most advantageous for our children seeking that? And unfortunately, not that many folks are thinking like that. They're thinking reactively. It's like, How do we fill these positions right away, like Sharif was referring to? How do we get money right now into the pockets of folks? And it's like, how are we actually investing into a situation that we want to see happen? And how are we making sure that folks are critical of what they're seeing and have ethics and have morals? Because really, when we talk about morals in this society, it gets a little specious, right? But how are we actually preparing folks to actually think outside the conceptual incarceration that they now exist in? And then how do we make sure our children never get conceptually incarcerated by the same kind of limitations imposed upon too many of us?
See, and this is what I'm talking about. I love the moral piece that you just talked about, because how I grew up, and again, it just was the environment. The morality was it's a sin to let a sucker keep his money. Like, I mean, and then now it's like I'm trying to, rejigger that, but that's when you don't have a lot, right? So when survival becomes a lot of your identity. And again, I don't want to speak to this as if all Black kids are in survival mode or whatever, or all white kids are not. Like,
right.
Like I said, I live in Kentucky with some of the poorest people and that I've ever seen that were white. But I know we're coming up on a close, but let's get some closing thoughts, man. I think this has been a really good conversation, man. So why don't I'm gonna go back and start with you, Ish, and then we'll go to you, Reef.
Well, first, I just want to emphasize, like, we need to make sure we don't have a 1984 situation where ideas and concepts get thrown down the memory hole and forgotten, and that certain type of things are promulgated by people who have interest to promulgate certain narratives and certain ideas. There needs to be folks that are very purposefully aware of kind of the historical context that created the current condition that we see right now, that face folks, like you said, not just our children, but all children around the world, right? And then how can we kind of start thinking about righting that ship, but also recognizing that sometimes we might have to jump in a lifeboat in order to get to another destination to create a different ship. And that type of thinking will be possible, I think, when we are more liberated to think around and have the space to think around those type of ideas. And we need to step away from just simply saying, how do we make sure we get a percentage of their thievery and robbery, and then it will be fair. I think that it was like, let's get what we need to get right now in order to produce what we want to see in the future. But what future do we want to see becomes a bigger question that I think that folks need to start thinking about and addressing in real ways, not just in ways where we're reacting to the circumstances in which we're under right now.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Shout out to Chris and Aaron for giving us some fodder to think about and react to. Makes me think of last week. Children children of some of the Black Panther Party members all got together. We were in Portland, Oregon. And one of the we call the children, Cubs, or we were called Cubs. So, Black Panther Party Cubs. And one of them is Malcolm, his brother named Malcolm Shabazz Hoover. So he's a Cub. He was in Philly, graduated from Central, actually. Now he lives in Portland. What he does now, he has a farmland. And he's donating hundreds of pounds of food to the community, teaching people about sustainability, all these kind of things. But one of the things he was talking about was starting to, he wants to start implementing AI into his work, and it will help him be more efficient. And being able to test the soil, having the readout. What's the what are the conditions? How much water each plot needs, depending on the conditions, but also the type of plant that crop that he's growing, right? And so all of that. So to me, it was just, and I just remembered that when you were talking about the benefits, it was like, hey, you know what, this, and he's training youth and other community members of how to do this, how this is sustainable, right? So that's just a small example of where it's not just consumers it seemed like everybody, every time they talk about coding or talking about playing a game. Whereas no, how can you also create to solve issues, right? And and to me, he's using AI to bring people together, right? Be people to around food and be it health and all these kind of things. And we just don't want any, what was the boy name, Manitai Teo or whatever that had
Teo,
those kind of situations. You figure 100 years ago it was less than 2 billion people on Earth. That's 100 years ago. 1920, say.
Close to 7 now, right? I know it's over
close
6.
to 8.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Less than 2 billion to almost 8 billion yet we're more disconnected. You know, I think a couple years ago there was a movie out. I didn't see it, of course. I ain't got time to waste. But it was a movie just like people just being in artificial intelligence or just like creating,
Are you talking about Ready Player One?
I don't know. But it was just, I mean, I saw the commercial and I'm just like, ain't this some dumb shit? You know what I mean? Like, but I'm like, it's also reality. You know what I mean? Like people are separated. Even with 8 billion people have found ways to be more isolated, you know, instead of using it to be more, you know, just help the 8 billion. And then the other thing, I think that discernment piece, being able to tell, you know, falsehood from truth, I'm like, that in itself is going to be a critical skill. You know, like just imagine how much spamming and phishing and all of that's just going to get amplified. Like, yo, we need our youth to know. And not only that, because I'm going to be an old man, like I'm going to need some youth to help me to protect us, me and others like us. So it's just like, yo, is this real? Is it not real? You know, all that kind of thing. So both and.
Man,
tools and shields.
Man, I love this conversation. I wish we had some more time to talk about it. You know, I tend to index and over-index in agency because I never have full faith that schools are gonna ever get it right. And the way that I do that, for the people out there, Sharif is used to hearing me talk about this. I look at 3 things: awareness, navigation, and duty. So for the people that's watching, one, on awareness, I hope that you are more aware that this thing is here, it's coming, people are talking about it, and some folks are running for it, some folks are running to it. But it's here. And so something needs to happen. On the navigation side, since it is here, what does that mean? What does that look like? Think about that if you're a parent or a student yourself or a concerned community member. Like, what ways can you go learn and teach yourself around this stuff without depending on the institution to who will undoubtedly insert their own values and and the things that they want into it? How are you doing? How are you learning it from a pure place? And then duty. Once you know better, how do you do better? You know, if a Sharif El-Mekki has raised you, and he's raised a lot of kids, he got a football team over there. But if he's raised you and taking care of you, it's going to be a duty for how you protect and take care of him. And I think if you pull that out to a larger microcosm, how are we preparing our young people so they can actually take care of what we've given them, make it better, and take care of us as we age and die out? So I think that that's just really important. But this has been really great. And on a final note, I mentioned the New Niagara tour. That's a movement that a friend of ours, J Artist Wright, Chris Stewart, Sharif El-Mekki, along with myself, Freedom Coalition of Charter Schools, we've gone out to 5 cities, or going to 5: Memphis, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago. We've done 3 of those. We still have to do Chicago and Houston. But we're doing a lot of what we're talking about. We're sitting down with people in those communities. What's working? What's not? What's the state of education there? What should our political platform be? Like, what do we value and how do we improve that? And we're gathering that data, and along the way, we're doing some documenting as we go. So check out the first podcast episode that we did. It's a limited run, so we're only doing it for that New Niagara is going to just be for those cities. So go check out the Memphis episode on Ed Post. And Ish was one of our special guests and helped host us in Philadelphia. He did a great job. Let's clap it up for Ish. He added a ton to that conversation. But I'm just very grateful for you guys. Thank you for the grace. I'm a little rusty in my hosting bag, but I appreciate the space and the chair. And it is Freedom Friday, and you're still not free. But hopefully you're a little bit closer after this time with Sharif, Ish, and myself. God bless, and take care of each other and yourselves. Peace.